guys, it's Janet Wakeland with RemarkablyCreated.com. It's March, which means that it is National Craft Month. So in honor of National Craft Month, I have a really fun craft. I mean, card making is a craft, and paper crafting is a form of crafts, but I wanted to use our stamps on something three-dimensional, something other than a card or traditional paper crafting for this project and to celebrate National Craft Month. So what I have is I have a 4x4 ceramic tile, and we're going to be working with the Blossoming Basket stamp on this particular project. A little bit about that real quick. This is the Blossoming Basket stamp set, and it is paired with this amazing basket weave dynamic texture embossing folder. During celebration, when you place a $100 order, you can select this as a free gift with purchase, this specific bundle. But again, that's available as a free gift only through March 31st, so you're going to want to make sure that you get your hands on this amazing bundle. And just to show you what that texture weave looks like real quick, here's one of our little silver gable boxes. And even on the metallics, it looks great, but it does indeed create a really pretty basket weave. So, and I actually cut the tops off of that just so it would hold my tiles. So I have that, that we're working with. So, a little note about the ceramic tiles. The source that I usually use is a company called Oriental Trading Company, and I will put a link to them in the YouTube description below. But these are currently not in stock there, so you may need to check with your local pottery store. You may need to do an online Google search for blank ceramic tiles. I like to call them naked ceramic tiles. And what you're looking for is ones that a potter would then take and paint and add and do other things too. There are tiles and things available at your local hardware stores and things, but a lot of them have a color to them or already have some type of a finish over top of them, and that makes them a little harder to emboss and color on and things. So these ceramic tiles are perfect. These happen to be 4x4. And one of the things that I encourage is to practice on the back of them. You can always cover that with a piece of felt, which you're going to want to do anyway so that it's not scratching up the surface of the coffee table or something like that. But you can always practice on the back, which is a great thing about that. So let's go ahead and let's grab one of ours and let's talk a little bit about embossing and just a quick review. Some of you watching know how to emboss, so you can tune me out for a second. But if you don't know how to emboss, the technique on the tile is going to be the exact same way that you would emboss on paper. You're going to need a very wet ink, and in this case I'm working with Versamark ink. I do recommend when you purchase any of your ink pads that you always buy a re-inker, but in this case especially because you want your Versamark to be really wet, and in the case of the tiles, because they're so porous, they're going to suck in more of that ink, and so you really want that wet pad, and that's when it's nice to have that refill on hand so that you don't have to wait a couple of days for an order to come in or run all over town looking for a refill. You already have it, so it's always a smart investment to get that refill at the same time. So the Versamark pad, we have an embossing buddy. Some people also know these as an anti-static tool, and you just use it to rub over your project, and that way then when you go to stamp, the powder sticks strictly to the wet ink, not everywhere else on your project. You're going to need some embossing powder, and in this case we're going to be working with gold. Of course you need your stamped image, or your image to stamp with, and then you need a heat tool. Just a quick little note about Stampin' Up's heat tool. It does have a really nice protective tip on it, so you don't have to worry about burning yourself and or touching that hot metal tip to your project, because in this case I am going to heat fairly close to the tile. It also has two settings, a high setting and a low setting. The low setting is perfect for things like your shrink plastic or gently heating ribbon that you've dyed or colored when you don't want it crumpling up. Anytime you want a nice slow heat. It also has a high heat setting, which is perfect for when you're embossing your cards, and also when you're doing some of your 3D work on mixed media as well as tiles and things like that. So let's go ahead and let's work. When I have a really large stamp or a very detailed stamp, I like to work with it on the actual block rubber side up. Instead of the traditional way of kind of pounding away like this, I like to have it on the block rubber side up. And I'm going to go ahead and just really pounce that in and push that in really, really good to the block, to the stamped image, because I really want to make sure I'm getting all that yummy detail on this beautiful stamp. Oh my gosh, the detail on this basket is so pretty. And in this case, I'm going to center it off to the left just a little bit, and I'm going to press and hold for just a few seconds. And I'm just kind of walking my finger around the design just to make sure that I catch all of it. We're going to lift it up, and you may see a faint outline. You may be able to see that there. I don't want to waste any time getting my powder right to this project because the tile is porous. It is soaking up that ink, and the longer I wait to get the powder to it, it literally becomes dry, and there's nothing for the powder to stick to. And trust me, through trial and error, I kind of figured that out. A lot of times I was the kind of person that I would like to ink up and stamp 2 or 3 things and then put powder on it. And that works fine on a card, but I learned it did not work on the tiles. So then with the tiles, you're going to want to put this on high, and you're going to want to just start to hold it in one corner and work it around. I will tell you, it takes quite a bit of time to heat set these, okay? And so it's not one of those things that you're going to do a whole bunch of them in a hurry, and if you're a demonstrator watching this, it would be a very time-consuming project in a classroom. You might want to consider having the embossing part pre-done for your customers and simply demonstrating how to do one. But again, you're going to hold this. I'm not going to turn it on now, and you would just simply heat it. And I like to just kind of move as it changes, especially in this case, as opposed to constantly doing this, and then just kind of moving it on. What I did experiment with, 2 things. One, spritzing it first with alcohol and re-inker, and even though it felt dry, it was not dry, and powder stuck everywhere to it. And so I actually needed to heat these. So while I was heating these in the microwave and the oven, I tried 2 different sources. I put a few of these on a cookie sheet and was able to heat a few at a time. I simply put it at 350 degrees, put it in the oven, and kept an eye on it. 2 things, whether you put it in the oven, heat these so that all the re-inker dries in the microwave, or with the heat tool, these are going to get very, very hot. And so you want to be aware of that so that you don't have any burnt fingers, okay, because that's not a lot of fun. So I'm going to set this aside to be heated at some other point, and through the magic of television, of course, we already have one that's done. And then what we're going to be coloring with is we're going to use the Stampin Blends markers. These are an alcohol-based marker, which means that they're going to dry very quickly, and also because they're alcohol-based, they're not going to smear with water or anything like that as you are, working with this, or if you decide not to coat this at the end. One thing that you do want to be careful of is that, depending on how you color, like if you're coloring, of course, very forceful, with any type of marker, you ruin its tip. And in this case, I'm going to try just to stay within the raised edges, and I'm just going to lightly color. As long as you do that and you're not real aggressive, you're never going to ruin your tips. If your budget can't afford it and you are worried about preserving your tips for some really fine work, I would suggest investing in a second set and labeling one with a C. There's putting a little C on there just for crafts and some of the 3D mixed media, other kinds of fun stuff that you might want to do, because these markers are amazing. There are a lot of fun things that you can be doing with these alcohol-based markers. And so let's just go ahead and color a few. One of the things that's a little difficult to do with this, because it is so porous and it soaks the ink in so fast, is to actually do some of that beautiful shading that the blends are known for. And so what I found as I was coloring them is I kind of needed to go back and forth just a little bit with my colors and kind of play with it just a little bit. It's not the same kind of blending that you would have on the paper. But you still can get that depth. Here I laid the light Bermuda Bay on first and then the darker one second. Let's see if we can do that again. Here, let's do some bright yellow flowers. I live on the East Coast, and while we didn't have, but I'm not on the coastline, and so while we did not have that horrible, horrendous weather that those in New England had, and prayers to all of you guys affected by that, we have had high winds, and just definitely hasn't felt like spring around here. So some bright yellow flowers right now. Maybe willing the daffodils and the crocuses to start popping their heads up by bringing some bright yellow in here. And I'm not going to color every single flower because you guys all know how to color, I hope. The blends are another great wise investment during celebration, because you would end up, when you buy the full set, with 2 free celebration items, or that would qualify you for this wonderful basket and basket weave stamps embossing folder, so that would be great. So, and we're just going to come in here in some of the little places and add just a little bit of depth to that. And of course you can do that with all of your flowers the whole way around. And I'll bring this one back in here for just a second, and mixing and matching your colors. And in this case then I used a little bit of the bronze and the crumb cake, and then we just did a little bit around the base of it. And let's bring in one more here for just a second. And in this case what I did was I put a little bit of alcohol, rubbing alcohol, not the good stuff, rubbing alcohol, and reinkers, which is another reason why you want to always have your reinkers around, in one of Stampin' Up spritzers. And I spritzed the block, and you can either just let it air dry, especially if you're not going to be embossing it, or again you can speed that process up in the oven. And while it may feel dry, it actually is not as dry as you think it is. But in this case, we're going to bring our stamp back in, and we're going to stamp with the Memento ink. And the Memento ink is the ink that you want to work with the blends, okay, with the Stampin' Blends. And so let's just get that coated really, really good. Make sure we've got a bunch of ink on that. And sorry if that makes the camera jump, and a couple of you guys are going, oh, the camera's wiggling. Sorry about that. So let's just go ahead and walk our fingers around. And then we'll have that pretty outline. And now again we can come back in and we can start to color with our Stampin' Blends. And again, it's going to be a little bit more muted, a little bit softer color. I could choose just to simply let this go and not even color it, because I kind of like the black and the purple, and I've got lots and lots of purple in my craft room. That's kind of the primary color scheme, is purple. But again, you can come in and color like that as well. I just wanted to try something different, and I wanted something more than this color. And of course I picked purple because that's where these are going to be used, under my coffee mugs. Now the one thing that I did want to finish up talking to you about is sealing these. Because you're using the Stampin' Blends and they're embossed, you would not need to seal them for fear of ruining the ink or the embossing. That's not going anywhere. Nothing's going to happen to that with water. The reason why you would want to seal them is because you still have all of this exposed tile. And if I sat a coffee on it that had, you know, a little bit of coffee leaking or whatever, I could indeed start to get coffee rings on it. So using either a matte finish or a glossy finish, depending on your aesthetic and what you prefer, spray from a company like Krylon or any other company that you like to use. Rust-Oleum has some great sprays for finishing things up. Then you would go ahead and give that a nice spray. And then I simply would take some of that, and I personally just go to Joann Fabrics and buy the self-adhesive type felt to put on the back instead of dealing with adhesive and all of those kinds of things. And then you have a beautiful gift. Put two in a sweet little box, wrap some ribbon around it, and with Mother's Day coming, you've got a sweet little gift that you could be giving to mom or grandma or your favorite coffee drinker, and make a great birthday gift. And inexpensive, but it's one that was made from the heart and with them in mind. So enjoy National Craft Month. Make sure that you use the link in the YouTube description below to access our blog hop. There is almost 50 of us from all over the U.S. and all over the globe celebrating National Craft Month with a blog hop tonight. So come visit us and let's see what kind of crafts we've all been up to with Stampin' Up! Products. Thanks, guys.